And we're live.
Hello, and we are live from Digital Pedagogy Lab in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I'm Maha Beli from the American University in Cairo in Egypt. I'm the co-director of Virtually Connecting. And I'm going to ask the folks on site to first introduce themselves and tell us which track they're in and who's teaching it. And then I'll ask the virtual folks to introduce themselves. And then we'll have a conversation about how the event is going so far. Take it away on site.
I'm Jim Luke, also known as Econ Prof in the Intertubes, and I'm in the Bonnie Stewart Digital Scholarship track.
Hi, I'm Megan Lynn. I also am in the Bonnie Stewart Digital Scholarship. I'm saying the wrong words. Digital Scholarship track. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, this is my first time here, so having a great time so far.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm Kim Jaxon, and I'm in the Data Code and Ethics with Chris Schaefer. It's totally the edge of my ability, and we're coding in R, and it's awesome.
I'm Benjamin Dockstader. I'm one of the on-site buddies. I am in social justice and curriculum with Sarah Goldrick-Rab and Jesse Stommel.
Hi, I'm Kate Malloy. I'm in the inclusive design track with Kevin Gannon. I'm tweeting from the FemEd Tech account this week if anyone's interested. And I'm running a workshop tomorrow called How to Ruin Your Course.
That is way cool. And also, I really think it's cool when you tweet FemEd Tech from DitchFed. You did that last year as well, right?
Actually, I have a virtual buddy there, Sheila, to thank for that she allowed me to take 1 week. She's curating right now as well, so thanks, Sheila.
Okay, thanks, Sheila. So is that everyone on site? Is there anyone hiding behind the camera?
I'll say hi, but there are so many of us.
No, please say hi.
All right. Hello. My name is Sarah Laura Kulik, and I am in the Critical Open Pedagogy class, which is being led by Rajiv. And this is my second time here at DPL and my first time as an on-site buddy with Virtually Connecting.
Yay!
All right, so virtual folks, let's start with David.
Oh, we have one more
We have one more person.
One more. So many people hiding. Hi.
In the room, I dropped in. My name's Jacob Gowell, and I am in the Rethinking Outcomes track.
Hello. You can stay.
He's here.
Yeah, everybody's here.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right, David. Remember to
Hi,
unmute.
everybody. I'm Dave, and I am a learning experience designer in Michigan at Michigan State University, and glad to be here.
Yay,
Hello.
Michigan! Yay!
Go Michigan.
Megan and I are from Lansing for everybody else there, which is basically where he's from.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, cool.
Justin, do you have audio?
I do. My name is Justin. I'm a phys ed teacher in New Jersey, currently working at a liquor store. This is why you see all these liquor bottles in the background, and why I'll be flitting in and out with my video camera.
Hi, I'm Karen Cangelosi in Keene, New Hampshire, and I'm a biology professor at Keene State College and having serious FOMO.
Hi, I'm Sharon Flynn. I'm joining from Dublin in Ireland. It's just after 9:30 at night, and I got wet coming home today, so I'm in my pajamas. You can't see that. I am project manager for an enhancing digital teaching and learning project across the 7 universities in Ireland, and I'm thrilled to be joining from my mobile phone. Very interested to see how Zoom works for this. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Sheila McNeil. I'm joining you from Glasgow in Scotland, where we're getting the same rain, I think, as Sharon has in Dublin. I'm now an independent consultant, and I'm just really looking forward to finding out a bit more about what's happening because it's always very exciting. And also, so happy that Kate can be, our person on the ground for FemEd Tech. There's no allowing FemEd Tech, no allowing. It's just fantastic that Kate's there and can be there and we can share things. So I'm really looking forward to finding out what's happening.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sybil Preby. I teach at North Dakota State College of Science in Wahpeton, North Dakota. I teach English and, college composition and creative writing, basically. And this is my first time hearing anything at all about digital pedagogy. So,
cool. Well, I mean, yesterday was the first time.
Okay, yesterday, technically.
Okay, and last but not least, Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Hogue. I'm in Sunnyvale, California. I teach instructional design at UMass Boston, and I'm doing a PhD in Ottawa, so very global. North American, not particularly global, I guess. I'm a co-director of Virtually Connecting and backup buddy for this session, and looking forward to hearing how things are going so far.
So on-site folks, we've all got FOMO. Tell us what's been going on. It's been a day and a half, 2 days actually now. This is the end of the second day, right?
Correct. Yeah.
What are the highlights? What have the highlights been for you? And of course, virtual folks, if you saw something on the hashtag you want to ask about, jump in at any time. So go ahead.
Well, we had.
Megan looked so overwhelmed in that minute, like I was going to get asked that question.
Totally processing.
It's two very intense days because both days were pretty much in your tracks. Tomorrow there'll be a little bit of difference. In the afternoon there'll be workshops from some of the fellows and some other activities. But we did have keynote yesterday. Keynote from Ruha Benjamin from Princeton. It was a very, very good keynote on the new Jim code, as she describes it, which is racism and code and technology. I thought it was very, very stimulating, and I learned a lot that I'm going to take back. We were also part of the swag for the conferences. We got a copy of her new book.
I just got it.
The book
That's awesome.
And started to read it last night and was already familiar with her work, and I highly recommend. Like you should. It's
The whole keynote was very lively and really informative. It was very thought-provoking and beautifully delivered. So this is my first time here at DigPed. I guess that's what we call it, right?
Right.
DigPed. Yeah. So, I mean, everything has been organized wonderfully. And outside of the tracks, the food has been fantastic. And I mean, really wonderful for anyone with, special dietary needs and things like that. So that, I mean, that's awesome because we have to eat, so yeah.
I think one thing I would like to say, this year there was a new innovation that they added. There was an optional it was really 2 days spread over 3 days, kind of a pre-conference called the Camp Intensive on critical pedagogy. And I attended that. So now I'm doing this, which is I'm not sure I've got energy to get to Friday at this point. But it's all been great stuff. And if you have never been to DigPed or any of their events, something I got to say that is just so powerful for me is there's a lot of this stuff about critical pedagogy, digital stuff. I mean, I'm familiar with it. I read it, I understand it. But Sean Michael Morris, Jesse Stommel, the people here, I have never seen a better example of walking and talking and doing it. And that has, for me, has been, and now in the tracks with Bonnie Stewart, I'm 100%, I'm going to go back and be 100% better teacher just from what I've been able to observe and experience how they teach.
Can I tell you something, and don't be offended when I say this? I'm going to tell you something, and please don't be offended when I say this. You're a white man saying you felt included. You're always included. So
it's
I
not just
respect what you're saying about walking the talk and all of that, but I think minorities are the ones who would really be able to say whether that is happening. And some minorities will feel that it is, and some might not. And you know, I love digital pedagogy, and I've taught there and Cairo and everything. But I'm just saying.
Well, but I was referring to more than just the inclusive stuff. I mean, even simple things like, you know, Lord knows we go to enough conferences where we talk about, you know, don't lecture at people and stuff like that. But I can't tell you how many times I've been at conferences and lectured at about not lecturing.
Right, I know what you mean. Yeah, like giving a lecture on active learning, for example.
Yes.
Yeah. Kim, I want to hear from you. How's it been for you?
So, you know, you and I, where we cross paths often is in connected learning, right? Used to be Digital Media and Learning Hub. So what's interesting for me is I feel like, so first of all, my Twitter in real life, right, is here. So that's already really cool. And there's a parallel play between those two groups. If you haven't looked up connected learning, between connected learning and digital pedagogy, they really do run alongside each other. So I think what I found really interesting about Ruha's keynote last night, besides just the amount of resources that she gave to us, and I'm pretty sure that link is up. I know they're live streamed, but I think the link is actually up too. So. Just the amount of reading you could do for the next few years, you'd be set. But most of the things I've gone to lately, and I'd love to hear dialogue-wise if this is ringing true for you, is that we're not just staying in the problem. There is, I mean, I keep hearing terms like ethical imagination. So thinking about when you're creating a technology or a classroom or anything, like imagining out scenarios, worst case and best case, ethical imagination, like where could this go? That was cool. And Ruha even talked at the end of her talk about not staying, I think it was her editor, right? Not staying in the problem set, but thinking about creative solutions to those. So I found that incredibly productive right now, that we're not just saying it's problem, it's problem, it's problem, it's problem, but let's imagine like this is hard. But what was your, I would be curious to see what others thought. We didn't get to debrief enough, I think, about the keynote last night, which was so good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was an incredible keynote. I've read some of her stuff before, and the way she's able to break down and explain, like I think she said that racism isn't the bad apples, it's the orchard. And the way she's able to break down and show you examples and bring it across is incredible. I think she made the point about the word abolitionist, that it was looking towards the problem but also pointing towards the solution. Other great things, Sherry Spalich has her book out.
Yes.
I have a signed copy of it.
That's cool.
And she did an amazing poem this morning to open the day, along with the hokey pokey, where she talked about, it's important, she talked about what it means to bring your whole self. So it's like you put your whole self in, you put your whole self out, and who's able to bring their whole self and when, and what the constraints are on that. And so I think that was a great start to the day as we thought about how different people are able to show up. And her endorsements on this, I see Maha's name, I see Treston McMillan Cotton, I see Audrey Waters, I see Chris Gilliard, so it's
I wanted to say, because I listened to the keynote online, and I loved how she talked about, we often talk to our students to think about who's being underserved, but we don't actually get them to think about how some of them are actually overserved. Like how are students actually looking at, if, this person's missing this, or this person's not included, but how are you overly resourced? And I thought that was so eye-opening for me, that we don't examine our own privileges enough, and we don't get the students that have privilege to think about the consequences of them being overserved while they're saying, those poor underserved people there. So that was really powerful, I thought.
Great. And the extension of that from, not only is that happening at a conceptual level, this is Jacob, but it shows up in the technology. The striking point for me in that was that when you entered that into a Word document, it was underlined in red, that this is not a word that exists. So that is getting extended into the infrastructure.
Mm.
Right, because it makes the privilege the default, right? And anything else is below that,
That's right.
rather than, yeah, I never thought of that. That's great.
Yeah.
Sarah and Kate, how have your days been? Sarah, I know you had a wonderful guest speaker today.
Well,
Several. One of them talked about food, which is interesting, like what Meghan was talking about.
That's right. We had the pleasure and honor of having Maha join us for about a half an hour in our critical open pedagogy track. And we had 4 guests today. We also had Tara Robertson and Maha. Can you help me with her name?
Cheryl Hodgkinson Williams from South Africa.
Yes.
And Jess Mitchell, right?
Yeah, and then Jess Mitchell. So we had read the article around looking at OER and open pedagogy from a social justice lens, right? And so actually, I think that connects a little bit to what we were just talking about with one of the themes from the keynote around. I think that they were talking about ameliorative and transformative, right? And that one is like putting a Band-Aid on something, and the other is systemic change, right? So that's one connection I'm kind of making here in this discussion. But yeah, it's been really great, and it was really wonderful to have all of these different voices and perspectives today to help us kind of think through and push deeper some of the concepts that we started talking about yesterday. So that was terrific. And we intersected at the end of the day with the inclusive pedagogy track, which Kate has been in.
Yes.
So
so it's been 2 days of kind of discussion and hard work, but just something that emerged from our reading that we were to have done in preparation, that we were looking at the online teaching manifesto from Edinburgh. And Kevin challenged us today to write our own or create our own in some sort of medium by Friday. So I felt compelled to share that with the FemEdTech account, because the people behind it, like Cyan Bain, just to get that word out there. Unfortunately, when we were meant to be working, they had kindly arranged for therapy dogs to visit, which is where I've been staring outside. There were just a couple of corgis and labs and things.
Is that still going on? Do we have permission to
Oh,
sort of
they just
left.
Oh man.
They'll be back Thursday.
So we have a couple of days with where I'm sure we'll be exploring creating our own manifesto. But I suppose for me, I'm kind of more preoccupied with my own workshop tomorrow, and then I'll maybe focus on that. But it's actually an interesting one to have that artifact like last year with Best Friends track to walk away with, that to work on creating something for ourselves. So maybe
that is so cool.
DigEd, Sharon, maybe we'll have an online teaching manifesto that we can work with.
That is so cool. And good luck with your workshop. We'll hear about it later. We won't try to make you give us a preview now. I was just thinking maybe this dogs thing.
That's not fair.
We're all just thinking about the dog. I love dogs and cats both. I'm one of those weird people who loves them both. Thinking this is not inclusive of cat lovers, but that's okay. But I mean, what do you do? Like, I think Sean and Jesse just have dogs. They don't have cats.
Justin, do you want to swap in and talk about what you're doing? I did.
No.
Jacob, I'm sorry, Jacob. Sorry about that.
So I was in the rethinking outcomes category, and Sean Michael
Who's
Moore.
teaching that? Sean? Okay.
No, Sean Michael Moore stepped in. It's being taught by Adrian Phelps Coco.
Oh yeah.
But Sean stepped in, and his comment was basically he doesn't like them at all. Just like get rid of them.
So many people in this community don't like them at all. Was that a big shock for you? I love the T-shirt. Sorry, I just noticed.
So there's the follow-up conversation to that was some pushback from some people representing STEM fields and how important it is for somebody who's going into nursing or engineering to have some really specific competencies so that you don't dose somebody with the wrong amount of a medication or the wrong
route to deliver the medication, or so you don't do your calculation wrong and your bridge collapses. But the next comment in terms of that caveat was somebody saying, one of the things we really want is when that happens, when a nurse sees a doctor's mistake in making a calculation about a medication, one of the outcomes that she wants is like an emotional response to incorrect math. But then how do you write an outcome about an emotional response? That would seem to be really inconsistent with the way they exist in institutions right now.
Yeah, I think it's the emphasis on measurability of outcomes. This is where the conversation becomes really difficult between, especially people in definitely in the humanities and social sciences, but it's not like the sciences don't have those values that are not measurable. They do, they just have more values or more things that are measurable. And obviously that it doesn't mean that they should, I don't think they should go away with them. It's just that which ones do you prioritize when you think about your curriculum? What do you start with? Do you start with your values, which are difficult to measure, or do you start with the things that are measurable? And what happens, I think, when you start with the measurable things and use those for accreditation and for all kinds of everything, and make your assessments only measure those, then what do you lose, right? I mean, you're going to spend a whole week talking about that. But I'm curious, how many people here are from sciences and how do they feel? And the virtual, I think of Karen at least, but there might be others. I'm not sure what it is.
I don't know if someone else wants to speak first, but I think we have these discussions all the time. Often there's a, you know, but you can't do that in a STEM class, which is kind of why I wrote an article with that title. And I think that there's a difference between thinking about the exact content that our students need to learn and what are the processes by which they actually get there to learn them. So I think we often mistake the idea that, yeah, a nurse needs to know how much to dose a patient, or you may have to memorize a certain equation, and what it means for what are the ways that we actually teach that get somebody to learn that stuff. And so it gets very confounded when you're thinking about outcomes for students. Like, I think students actually find their way to that content when we drive them in those directions, and that, you know, the way that we do assessment or the way that we're, you know, formulating our teaching doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to learn all that STEM content because you keep saying it's so critical for them to learn it. I'm not sure if I'm being clear about that.
I think that's really well said. I work with a physics and a biologist colleague thinking about the teaching of writing in science. And one of the things that we're curious about is, you know, in a lot of disciplines, we're just trying to get students to reach known conclusions. And that happens a lot in science, right? You're going to do the same lab report in the same way so that you reach known conclusions, instead of showing them, like, so it's not about, do you know the science? It's, do you know how to be a scientist? And those things are constructs like that. It seems known now, but that crap was hard fought, right? Trying to get to those known conclusions. And so the learning outcomes can sometimes get in the way of what you're saying, kind of processes of like, but I want to show you like how the questions are formed and that they're driven by you. And you're curious about, how does light work? How come I can see that thing and Benjamin can see that thing, right? That they're driven by the student.
Right, and I would much rather have a nurse that's going to question my medication. Yeah. Like, is that really what the doctor ordered? As opposed to, I memorize that as 16 milliliters, you know, no matter what. And so that being able to question and analyze and diagnose is so much more important than stuff that you can look up, right, which is basically that content that you're talking about.
There's an aspect of the conversation on the learning outcomes that reminds me, or has echoes in something we were talking about in digital scholarship. In digital scholarship, we were talking about how the mechanisms of, you know, scholarship, sharing scholarship, and trying to find good stuff is, and the peer review processes, et cetera, like that, and how at schools, for what are really administrative, managerial purposes, unrelated really to scholarship, those processes have been kind of hijacked because they're quantifiable. And so only peer reviewed and number of citations and rankings count. And I think a lot of that goes on with learning outcomes where, we've all been talking here about learning outcomes and how it does it or does it not help us teach and the students learn. But I know, at least in our experience in the US, my experience in the US, and there's an overwhelming part of, well, learning outcomes have been hijacked. And the real thing going on here is it's about the institution's assessment process.
That's a good point. It's much bigger than just the classroom, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Justin and Sheila both had something to say, so I'll let Justin and then Sheila speak. Go ahead.
Sure. So it's funny about learning outcomes and values in the phys ed world, because the idea that we're forcing students to, kick or run or hit this number or do whatever and master the movement is actually decreasing their love of movement. So by forcing these learning outcomes on the student, we're actually setting them up for failure as they get older. And I think for me, if you look at the value of movement for us in phys ed and put that first and say, hey, we have to have the students fall in love with movement, that would change everything. And students wouldn't hate to come to the class and then, when they get older, have this negative association with movement.
That's great. Yeah. I think the thing I was going to add there is really maybe going back to what Jim was saying. I know that a lot of my former colleagues, particularly medical profession and nursing, it was also pressure, not so much from the institution, though it's there, but also from professional bodies in terms of competencies and, a whole list of learning outcomes. So whilst we would try and have a debate about, well, actually, you really don't want to have 35 learning outcomes, that's probably a bit much. This was coming from a professional body, and that's quite difficult to counter. I'm not saying you can't do that, but there's a whole kind of quality assurance side to the learning outcomes debate as well, which we have to be cognizant of as well. And that's really difficult as well, because there's that kind of balance between kind of orientating students, letting them see that kind of, where they're going to go, giving them a bit of a pathway. And then also, answering those kind of quality assurance issues as well, which are really important if you need that professional accreditation to practice in a particular field.
That's making me think about a couple of things. One of them is, do you really assure quality when you do that? So for example, I
don't know.
Someone gets a course approved by the way they design it.
Mm-hmm.
And then nobody actually checks what they're actually doing in their class. Sometimes someone checks the output, the student output, but then also a lot of times they check the student output when they finish the class. They don't see where they were at for day one to see how much they've improved, which is, I think, more important. I mean, one of the things is, how do you set an outcome before you see where the students start from? Let's think about underserved and overserved. And in my institution, I definitely have those students who are overserved, who come in over-prepared for college, and they don't struggle and they do well because they were already at a certain level, not because I taught them well. It's this delta that none of that really measures. Like it's totally, I think a lot of writing teachers obviously talk about that. I think improvements rather than just meeting a particular outcome, but does it really assure any quality when you design courses with outcomes?
Probably not.
So I have a question for everyone. I was originally, and I might still do this, even though you guys have all talked about how they're horrible. I was going to give my students the list of our outcomes for our class on day one. There's 10 outcomes for each one of my classes. These are college composition classes. And then I was going to have them do like a backward design activity for the next class time, because I see them like one time that first week, and then I don't see them for, a while because of Labor Day, blah, blah, blah. So should I not do that? Because the goal is that they look at the outcomes and think to themselves, how can we achieve these outcomes as a class? And then they come up with the ideas that may or may not align with what I was going to originally do anyway. So I have backup plans, no worries. But I was originally going to do that just to see what they would come up with. And I get the feeling from all of you that that's a horrible idea or something.
I would say on that too, like, if the outcomes are there and they're real, don't keep them secret, Like,
yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of this,
right, and these come from our state. Like the whole state created these outcomes, so I can't change them.
There's a lot of like, we're going to flatten the student teacher hierarchy, and I teach middle school. So I'm also honest with kids and like, I'm sorry, you don't have a say in this, or like, this is, and then show them the places where they do have agency.
Right.
Like, here's a place where you have real agency, and here's a place where I'm sorry, but you don't, and maybe I don't. And,
And that we're all
exactly.
right. You are as well.
I also don't have the agency to.
Right.
I think there's also the potential to go the route that you see with Remy Kaler's, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right.
Remy Kaler?
Kaler's marginal studies project, where you can have students write back to those learning outcomes, annotate the outcomes as an activity.
Which sounds like you're thinking of doing. I mean, the backwards outlining or, designing from it together is kind of a really cool idea, right?
It's a completely different thing that you're doing than what usually happens. You're not telling them these are the outcomes, these are how we're going to meet them. You're saying these are the outcomes. You have agency about how we go about meeting them, which gives them the opportunity to say, well, this is where I'm at and that's how I can reach there. And it gives them, I think, the opportunity to come up with different things so they're not all seen as like one homogeneous group, right? I think what you're doing is amazing. I think it's showing your values, dealing with the system, like Benjamin is saying, like this is how much agency we have within these restrictions, and it's one level of resistance, I think.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is worth bringing up here is there's a book called I think Pedagogy of Liberation or something about liberation by Paulo Freire and Ira Shore, and what they talk about is, as you teach resistance, you have to keep teaching the dominant culture because students need that for like economic empowerment. But then you also teach them to be critical of both the dominant culture and of the minority culture, so that you're not studying anything uncritically. And you're not ignoring the dominant. So for example, in my context, English is the colonizer's language, right? But you're not going to get a good job at a multinational that's well paying if you don't speak English. So we're not going to stop teaching people to speak English. But we're also going to not teach them that this is the only good culture out there, that your culture is bad, or that your culture is perfect either. It's just about being critical about what you've got and what you have to deal with, and then thinking about alternatives and not feeling like this is the only thing because that's the dominant thing.
But are we perpetuating it by making that argument, right? So at 4Cs, which is the Conference for Composition in March, we've had a huge explosion around Asao, the director's opening talk, where, his argument in a nutshell is that if you are teaching standardized English, you are racist. And the more we keep saying this is going to help you, we are just perpetuating that same. Matter of fact, we need to stop even saying, well, you're going to do this until and then you can code switch and then you can change the system. We need to just say schooling is racist. And by teaching you white standardized English as a colonizing language, we agree we're keeping white people in power. Period. And so let's work from there. I mean, it's a very profound statement, right? Like, and this is why the field, if you saw the listserv, is
but not on that listserv. But there was a really interesting article on hybrid pedagogy that I helped review. I'll let you talk again, but from an Asian American person who teaches, right? I don't know if you've read that article, but what she was saying is that she realized that she, as the teacher, didn't have the right to tell people what kind of English they wanted to learn. So she did a lot of tutoring on the side. And some people wanted the English that would help them socialize and pick up girls at bars. And some of them wanted this very formal English, and some of them wanted, and she was like, actually, let the person choose what they want to learn. But obviously what you're saying is obviously there's a dominant thing going on there. So if you don't recognize it,
right.
But go on.
How do we ever get at cultural ways of knowing or other ways of doing it if we don't invite students to make meaning in ways that make sense to them, would be kind of a follow-up to that, right? So
is Asao Inoi's keynote recorded?
It is. It's also should be out in C's now, and I will tweet it out again.
Thank you, and tag VConnecting, so folks who are watching.
I'll totally do it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any other thoughts?
Can I throw in a plug for the students here?
Yes.
So the first, like the students who've been working to like help us with everything and make sure we all get our badges. Stephanie Shea, who was Jesse's student, she like has designed all the stuff. She makes sure we got fed all of it. And then there's some students here with us. I've met a few, Noemi and Hannah and Jessica Chrétien, and they are amazing. And the other side of that is a lot of the people here, I find I get like this fanboy thing where I'm like, oh my God, it's, you know,
Yes.
it's so-and-so. And they have been exceptionally graceful, welcoming to, you know, to us and the students alike. It's been wonderful. So I'd like to just say thanks to all of that.
Yeah.
It's actually it's a really, it's honestly, it's a really small team.
Yeah.
Put together such a massive.
Yeah. Like this, like the other day, some of them didn't eat lunch because they were taking care of us, and some of them were here till 9:30 at night. So they've been doing amazing stuff.
Yes.
Thank you for that. I don't think anyone's ever done that. We should actually have them on Be Connecting too. I mean, I remember in my keynote years ago, I pointed to them, but we've never had them on Be Connecting. We have students who are in the tracks on Be Connecting, but we don't have the students who are like Stephanie and back at the time when I was there, the problem. Stephanie was there.
Yeah,
She's
she's
on the
in one,
track
yeah.
as well, trying to double, triple duty.
Oh, that's crazy. That is crazy. Yeah. So on-site folks, I don't know how much time you guys have left. We've had you for 35 minutes. If any of you need to leave, that is fine. If you can stay, that's also fine. And I'll stay online either way for a little bit.
I do need to go.
Okay, thanks, Benjamin.
Thank you. It's nice to see you. Yeah. Hey, Karen. Hey.
Yeah. Nice to see you, Benjamin.
Nice to see you too.
I wish I was there.
I'm crashing.
No, you know, Karen, you get in the car now. You could be here tomorrow.
That's true. I could make it.
Thank you all. It was very nice to meet you and talk with you.
Thank you, Meghan. It's lovely meeting you here. I can stay online for another 15 minutes and we can stay on YouTube for whoever can stay and we can just keep chatting. But of course, if anyone needs to leave, that's also okay.
Oh, there you go.
Who is that keynote by again?
Asao Inui, and
Okay.
I'm about to tweet it right now.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Because Lisa Delpit also says the same thing that Farah was saying about teaching the dominant culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my intuition of the advantage of that is that you also need to learn how to take it apart.
Yes.
Right. So it's not just taking it about teaching the dominant culture and
that's Benjamin. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also, it's not just so you can assimilate. It's also so you can dismantle it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that too.
True. That's right. It's not, you can't just pretend it doesn't exist. I mean, the thing that we had, I grew up in Kuwait where the word Israel was blacked out of all the textbooks, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I was a kid, I was like 8 years old, and I'm like, it exists. Don't pretend it doesn't exist. Like, you don't want me to grow up thinking that this country doesn't exist, you know? Just because I believe in Palestine doesn't mean I ignore the reality of where we're at right now.
You need to know what you're up against.
Yeah, you can't resist something if you don't know what it is, right?
Yeah. I think maybe the issue has been that we've never actually taught the non-dominant cultures.
Right.
Right. And
obviously in Canada now, this is a big thing, right?
Yeah. Incidentally, on a personal note, somebody here recognized my last name, Dockstader. And they told me about another Dockstader who had written a book on all the different clans of the Haudenosaunee tribes where I'm from.
Oh, wow.
And so that got me emailing my parents and my family, finding out more about like our family clan structure. And so just like a weird 6th degree, you know, go all the way around the world and have somebody.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. So there's a question from Rebecca.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask about whether or not there have been conversations around the shootings this weekend, in particular.
Yeah.
Just because there's a lot going on, and I think that it's kind of appropriate.
At the camp intensive, yes, there was a lot of conversation, particularly Sunday. And I know I personally was very, very affected because I spent 27 years, my most formative 27 years growing up in Dayton, Ohio. And the Dayton shootings hit me really hard. But yeah, there's been a lot of conversation here. I think it's colored a lot of, what I mean is like set a backdrop. There was a little bit of conversation on Monday about, like, well, why are we here, when all this is going on? But I think the general sense was all of that shooting is why we are here, and why we're here this week is because in the long run, it's, critical pedagogy, it's inclusion, it's open, it's teaching and learning is how we're going to get past the hate. That's how we have to establish the compassion and get past this.
It also wasn't present in as immediate a way in the keynote, but Ruha's opening slide was, we have guided missiles and misguided men.
Yes.
MLK.
MLK, we figured out.
So the women are fine? That's interesting.
I did hear, there was something I saw on Twitter actually today. I can't remember, I'll need to see if I find it, but it was saying, like there are a lot of women that are disgruntled, disaffected and everything, but they're not going around shooting in shopping malls. It was quite a, straight to the point. I'm paraphrasing very badly. It's very strange watching it from this side of the pond as well, because we have very different attitudes to gun culture as well. And I suppose like the shooting that I remember was the one in Dunblane all those years ago, which is quite close to here, but practically everyone that I knew had someone there. Like my best friend's sister-in-law was a teacher in the other primary one class. I just remember the whole place, everyone just, we were all just stunned. So I actually can't really imagine how people are feeling in the States just now, just because this just like, it's just incomprehensible. And why there's no discussion about, we're not seeing enough discussion about gun control. Just like, I can't. Anyway, that's kind of getting off the point, but it just.
I think there was a moment last year, I was hearing Chris Friend's intro to critical digital pedagogy track, and we did introductions and we talked about a moment when we were vulnerable, and without giving the person or the institution away, someone introduced themselves, said their job title, and said, by the way, I worked at such and such a school, which would have an immediate connotation of a mass shooting. And it was the first introduction we did. And Chris very openly shared a moment in his teaching when he was vulnerable was when he didn't know who had died in the Pulse shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Had to teach the next morning, not knowing if his community where he was from, anyone was dead. Which obviously our track actually didn't really discuss anything that's happened, although I find myself kind of watching the news and trying to shake it off in the morning before walking across the road to get into this mindset. But I think that colors this landscape. I know just because of my background, I experienced both sides of it. I had those questions here last year from a couple of participants that just asked me, well, what's gun culture like in Ireland? What do young men like? And I said, well, kind of everything else. I don't know. People are interested in, other things. I don't know anyone my own age that has any interest in that sort of thing. So I think those conversations, even aside from two obvious terrible tragedies, they're there anyway. I think everyone has that kind of story or their background. So yeah.
I think this was the first time that I really started to have that cautionary or that a feeling in my head of, what do I bring up in my classroom? In North Dakota, we have state laws that allow students to have guns on campus, and we have certain safes on our campus too. And I grew up in a very gun-based culture. I'm probably the only liberal on campus, to be quite honest. And I have students who are blatantly pro-Trump right now. I have had that since the election. And so this was the first time, and it probably should have happened before, but this was the first time after the shootings that I thought, do I have to watch what I bring up in class? Am I seriously gonna have to start doing that? Do I have to start censoring myself? And that's I mean, for me to have to think about that is so secondary and so tiny compared to what those people are dealing with in El Paso and Dayton and everybody who's dealt with like Sandy Hook and everything. But for a teacher in this day and age to have to go, oh, I shouldn't say I'm a Bernie Sanders fan. Like I shouldn't even say that. I should take my bumper sticker off my car. I shouldn't say anything about Obama. I shouldn't. and I teach rhetoric. We have to cover these controversial topics. We have to dive into them. What's that going to do? Like, am I going to end up pissing off some young man who has gazillions of guns and access to them for various reasons, because every state has their own whatever, and I'm going to no one should have to think about this crap. No one.
But some people don't even have a choice of what they can show or not show because of the color of their skin or the way that they look. So
completely agree.
I mean, one of the things I used to say about, for example, homosexuality is that you get to choose whether you show it or not sometimes. It's not always visible. So sometimes it's visible, and then if someone's got a, is going to be homophobic, it's going to come at you. Like for me, I can choose to cover my hair or not. And if I don't, people won't know I'm Muslim, and then I won't have to face that. But then there are other aspects that you can't do anything about. And so
even something I think of when I'm kind of switching back and forth between Irish me and American me, that and it just resonates because I would be the same way, Sybil, that I don't put anything out publicly here for fear of there could be some Trump supporter that decides to, really take a dislike to me. And I think of at NUI Galway when Donna Lanklow was our keynote speaker, and she was proudly wearing her Black Lives Matter t-shirt over there, which I would do too. That wouldn't bother me. I would be comfortable doing that. I support that movement. Would I do it here? I don't think so. I think I would actually be afraid. It's kind of, I notice my own family even kind of talking in hushed whispers sometimes, going, well, the people next door from Georgia and Florida, they might be, we might not be. I don't know, that people are talking in hushed tones.
I think this whole discussion kind of gets back to what you said, Jim, earlier about like why are we here, right? And like what is it that we do? What do we do in our whatever little worlds we're in, our classroom or other kinds of spaces that we occupy to make changes? And the fact that if you're in a really dangerous place and can't take risks, then you shouldn't take them. But we need to build communities where we are actively resisting this kind of stuff that's going on. And those of us that have the voice and the privilege within our spaces to teach our students and take risks and build those communities, everything needs to change. Everything that we talk about, I can't do that because the accreditation system. Well, who created the accreditation systems, right? Like we need to be building up structures and institutional forces that can shift what's going on out there. And I'm not saying I know exactly how to do that, but I think the more that we have a reductionist approach to the questions, the less we're going to be successful. And the more that we look at it systemically and can work on it collaboratively, the more that we may be able to actually enact some of the kinds of larger scale changes that are going to need to happen.
Well, that's precisely what I would think. Oh, sorry.
What Karen said there, the school I teach at, 19 months ago, we were within literally 82 minutes of a mass shooting on the campus. And we evacuated the campus very quickly. And the reason no one died at LCC and the reason no one talks about Lansing Strong is because a student who was a friend of the student who was ultimately arrested did take, the student that was arrested had multiple guns, multiple magazines. He was ready and he had a timetable for 4:00 that day. And he passed his friend. He told a friend, he says, well, if you're on campus, wear reds and watch the TV, but wear red pants so I know who you are. And the friend took that seriously and felt connected to everybody else enough to raise a flag. And we were able to evacuate the campus and take care of things. So it really, there's a politics level and we have to deal with that. And there's hate that goes with it. But at an underlying level, it's building these connections, these human connections, student to student, teacher to student, student to teacher, to everybody. We're all, as His Holiness talks about, first order, we're all humans. And we've got to build that. Sorry.
His Holiness the Pope?
I'm emotional about it. Huh?
Is His Holiness the Pope? I'm just asking.
Who's His
His
Holiness?
Holiness the
I was,
Dalai.
I was going to say Dalai Lama.
Yeah, I didn't know what that was. Okay, Sybil, you want to say something?
Oh, I was just going to echo what Karen was saying, that like what she said was kind of the other half of my brain during all of this, is that I do have students of color in my class that are sitting right next to these other students who I am a little skeptical of. And so I sit there thinking, I don't want to censor myself, and I do want to censor myself. But Karen brought up a good point that I can't, it has to be dismantled somehow. We have to create a culture on our campus that doesn't allow for that, doesn't allow for white supremacist type of talk or anything like that. And we have a really great non-discrimination statement. We've been told that ours is the most inclusive and strict in the whole state, which is really, we're very proud of. And some students have looked at us funny when I read it out loud in class on the first day. So I just wanted to say that Karen was kind of echoing the other side of my head, that I was like, yes, I can't not let my students have their voice, the students who, are not in the majority or dominant culture.
There's a great piece by Sarah Ryder called Tolerating Intolerance, and it's her walkthrough of a student who wanted to write a paper, an essay on being a white supremacist, and all you would go through when a student asked you about that in a composition class. And the community that luckily she had built, that I don't think she would say she's not sure how much things changed, but her argument in that is that not going to change anything if that student is excluded. That what he needed to be is there hearing the other students of, saying, really? Now, I will also say that was pre-Trump, and I don't know that she'd answer that the same way now. The other thing I want to say is I've just spent, my partner and I have been 6 weeks on the road. This is week 4 on a craft beer road trip across the United States. So Jeff and I are very clear where we can put our white, cisgendered, heteronormative bodies in places where many of our friends cannot. And it's also been since 2015 when we've done it to now. It feels this summer has been the hardest, and shouldn't be shocked by the things people are willing to say when you're sitting next to them at a brewery, when they think you're one of them. So we've had to make some decision rules about where we're going to intervene and where we're not. Some of it's chilling. And I'm, like I said, totally aware of the privilege of being a white woman. And I have had more arguments this time than I have in prior. I mean, I think there was some foul language at one point, but I just can't be quiet anymore. Especially as a white, I cannot, I'm incapable of being quiet anymore. So bring it.
And I wonder, am I the only one that feels like we're running out of time in some ways too? Like things are getting worse. There's a sense of coalescing around this stuff. Maybe it's because I live in this country with Trump at the helm, and that we talk about let's make changes in higher ed, but it feels too slow. And maybe I'm just impatient, but I feel like we need to be doing more than we are doing. And I don't want to spend time arguing about little things like learning outcomes. You know what I mean? It's kind of crazy making. I don't know what I'm saying exactly or what I think we could be doing, but it feels like we're not doing enough.
It feels urgent, in a different way.
It feels urgent, yes.
Yeah.
I think when we're having the conversations, which I think that goes back to what Jim was saying about communication and community, which is really important. I mean, obviously, in the UK, we have a different issues, but we have this this whole, the Brexit thing. And it's really, I have felt really disempowered in terms of democracy because I voted against leaving the EU. I'm forgotten. I've been told that, that we are just, enemies of the state almost. Our voices are not being heard. We have a very dangerous right-wing government in place with a sheen of diversity and inclusion. But actually, the people that are in charge now are so right-wing, it's terrifying. And there is that feeling of disempowerment, and what can I do? Because like you, I have privilege. You know, I'm white, middle class, educated. I can talk to people like you all over the world, but I don't know how to have a discussion. And I've noticed it more in the last year or so with people that are, you know, well, you can't have a discussion. And this does come back to education. It's why we do need to have some of maybe the more boring conversations about learning outcomes, because we need to have a framework for doing things as well. But, you know, that's part of a bigger picture. But it's very, very difficult. And, you know, then you start othering people. And that's really different, you know, because it's all their fault. And if only they would change.
Sorry, yeah. But this is also the thing, right? Is I think pre-Trump, people who were against Trump probably didn't realize how much Trump has support. I remember being on Virtually Connecting all this, oh my God, it would be such a disaster if Trump won, right? And it's all recorded on YouTube. I can show it to you. And then now I think this sense of running out of time, of course, things are escalating, but also there's a possibility that this guy wins the next election. And that is a disaster. Like when he won, we're like, okay, 4 years from now, we'll have done something about it. And I don't think that's what's happening at all. And obviously the sentiment in the UK, in other parts of Europe, in a similar way here in Egypt as well, but farther back. And is this thing is that the educated left-wing folks are not, I don't think we understand the other side enough to be actually having those conversations. Like, you know, and you were talking, Kim, about talking back. I don't know how well we understand why they're at where they're at in the first place.
I will say there's plenty of times when, you know, if you're sitting somewhere and you're having a cocktail with someone, you know, I've had really good conversations where once you've created some trust, obviously, even within 10 or 15 minutes through some stories, that someone asks, I'm from California, right? So someone's going to ask a question about California and how liberal we are. I went to Berkeley, you know, yeah. And then the questions are great. Like, you guys can't own guns in California. And I'm like, no, that's not true. We own guns. Like, the dialogue can happen if you give the first 10 or 15 minutes of like, so where are you from? Kind of like, we've gotten there too. And then every once in a while you just can't be quiet. Yeah.
I think one of the difficulties is in our media, the conversation doesn't come out well. Everything, you know, our media is so sports reported oriented. Everything, every political thing is a horse race. Everything is, you know, just a winner loser type thing, and unfortunately, so the intersectionality of things here is very complex, and the hidden part is, the visible part is the racial and ethnic divides, but the hidden part that doesn't get discussed is the intersectionality with the class divides and the income inequality. And I know I'm not a young man, and for my entire lifetime, and I have relatives who are, you know, I'm second generation from the farm. White people, lower classes, working classes, farm classes, rural, white folk have been fed by, you know, the wealthy classes this thing to other them, that everything, and the American dream, which we were all fed and we grew up on, and was true for my dad. But, you know, for my generation, we grew up with the promise of the expectation, as, you know, as a privileged white male coming up, was I was supposed to do approximately double as well as my dad, who was supposed to do double as well as him. Well, you know, that died in the 1970s. It's the generation, it just hasn't happened. And so the anger that goes with that has all been directed towards others. And that complexity makes everything very, very difficult. So
one of the last concluding thoughts from Ruha Benjamin's keynote the other night, she was speaking about how often when people think about their early education, or primary education, secondary education through high school, some of the things that stick out the most are really small interactions. And what she took from that was the idea that sometimes what's small is actually really big. And I think that's an area for hope, where a conversation around rethinking outcome, I don't think we have awareness of the possible impacts. And I think that that really is a place for continuing the work.
Sorry, I'm going to have to run, but this has been so great. Thanks, everybody.
I am too. Thank you all. And
bye-bye.
I actually also need to go.
I think that was actually a really good closing.
It was.
Because it brought us right back to the keynote this morning and everything, and it has been an hour. So I think, thank you everyone so much for answering the question and engaging in the conversation. I think that was really important.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.